Greetings from Act Now. This video is about seeing things. It's about the visual sense, self-mastery with respect to your visual sense. It is also about creative thinking. Given those two things that I just said, you probably would not have thought that this video is actually about your imagination. You might not have thought that, but that is what it's about. It's also about creative thinking, yes, and sensory perception, especially the visual sense. But it is about your mental visual sense, mental plane visual sense. That is visual sensing. It's not the physical visual sense, no. The two, mental visual sense and physical visual sense, are two aspects of the same thing. Okay? Consider that. In fact, with respect to how the human constitution is constructed throughout the life cycle meaning what we call death, birth, life, death, birth, life, in the four phases, the afterlife thing, if that's what you want to call it, then the coming into, the returning into an incarnation, then the incarnation, and then the going back out of phase. Right? Well, in that phase, it is the presence of, or the potential for physical sense, physical visual sense apparatus to develop from a blueprint that exists in the mental plane, the causal plane, on back beyond the lower mental plane, or the intellect level plane, that brings about the physical sensory apparatus. Okay? And it is the mental plane sense, function going on, and organ going on, that has precedence over the physical one. In fact, in between the two, you have the astral visual sense, if you will. It's and then there's the energy body vibration rate of it all too. The health of, let's say, the vitality of the energy body structure that has to do with your physical visual sense, the health of it determines the health of your physical visual sense. So if your eyes are blind, then this is a result, really, this is related to a problem or damage to a higher level, or a higher plane level of that sense. Anyway, to move on. It is the mental plane visual sense that we are addressing here. It's the more real one. It's the one that lasts longer in the life cycle. It's the one that takes precedence. It's there before the physical one. Anyway, that's what we're talking about. And we're talking about creativity, creative thinking. This all has to do with imagination, which is the mental visual sense. We often associate the word imagination also with creativity or creative thinking. We also often associate it with daydreaming, which is involuntary mental visual sensing. That's what it is. And it often is not all that, it's not really something we would associate with self-mastery at all. No, we would associate it with a lack of the same. Yeah. Our concern here is not with idle daydreaming. No, it is with controlling what's going on rather than not doing so. We do not recommend not doing so. We do recommend doing so. Now, I hope I've made a little bit of sense so far. Well, I think I have. Alright. Let's say you're picturing something in your mind, something that you need to get done. Let's talk about seeing things through to their end. You have a project before you. You want to see it through to its end. Well, then do that. It might only take a few seconds, even though the project, physically, the physical plane could take a year to get it to do. If you're really good at this, or if you're really lousy at it, if you're really lousy at mental visual sensing, you can see a year-long physical project through to its end mentally within 2 seconds, because you're not really very well picturing it at all. So there wasn't much detail there for it. You zip right through it. Or if you're really good at it, you're really good at seeing something through to its end with a lot of detail. In other words, seeing every little step of the way. You know, during that year of physical activity to get this thing done. If you're really good at being able to fast forward very clearly, mentally, visually, clearly through to the end, well, then you might get all of that done. Every little step. The whole flow within a second or two. In between those two things, though, like being really lousy at doing it, being really good at doing it, will take longer to do so intentionally. Intention here is an important concept as well. We're talking about doing this thing, these mental envisioning intentionally. So seeing something through to its end, I want us to take that literally. Seeing something through to its end. Also, seeing it as we're doing it, as we're actually carrying out the work to get something done, if it's a physical plane activity, then in doing the physical work to, so to speak, see it through to its end, if we are mentally attending to what we're doing all the time that we're engaging in the physical activity, from the beginning of the project to the end of the project, then we are seeing visually it through to its end. Okay, we are also mentally attending to what we're doing from beginning to end. Therefore, we are seeing at all levels here. We'll be using our eyes. If we have good physical vision, we will be mentally attending to it. In other words, mentally picturing what's happening as it's happening physically, mentally picturing it, not just seeing it take place. Not like I'm seeing this pen here, okay? With my physical visual sense, I see the pen. Do you see the pen? Yes, okay. I can also mentally picture that pen. I can mentally picture it here. I can project that image out to where the pen actually is, too. I can see the pen out there, but it's still right here. But I can see it here as being out there. In other words, I'm projecting my mental image out onto the world, while understanding that it also, as far as my own my own mental sphere is going on, my individualized portion, or my individualized mental body, my portion of the mental plane that is associated with this specific focal point of consciousness and experience and motion here that I call my human being, okay, is right here. I can do all of those things, and while I'm performing activity, I can watch it happening and mentally attend to it, okay? I see it with my eyes, and I do it all the while that I'm engaging in activities, mentally attending to it, and I follow through until the thing is done. And at any moment in there, I can also see it through to its end with my mental visual sense by fast forwarding from the present to completion, from the present stage to completion. I can always keep doing that. These are different activities going on, mental ones. No matter how you slice it up, they're mental activities going on simultaneously, intentionally, controlled. Okay? Seeing something through to its end. Now, if there is something that you want, that you need to accomplish, that has to do with visualizing something, like, well, I don't know, you just come up with your own idea here, as an example. You want to communicate with somebody, good grief, you want to see dead people, I don't, the resources coming together, something that you want to do, whatever it is, you need to visualize something. Good grief, you do it all the time. You're visualizing something right now in your mind. So, you want to ask yourself questions like, okay, is this just my imagination? I mean, is there anything real to this? Isn't something just my imagination? I mean, that's like asking if I can feel that I'm sending warm energy to my injured elbow, and I can feel it there. Isn't that just my imagination? The same things that you're trying to visualize, like a project in its completed state, although sitting before you in the physical plane, it's still all in pieces. It's just you've gathered together some resources, but you have not assembled the thing yet or brought it about. But you're looking and you're seeing its completed state. The mental plane, okay? Isn't this just my imagination? Is there anything real about it? Any of these mental plane activities? Energy, plane of energy plane activities, mental plane activities, astral, when we throw in any kind of an emotional component. When we start talking about adding a desire, there's an astral, it's astral plane activity as well. Astral mental visual sense taking place. Astral vision. If I want to see a remote location and I'm picturing it in my mind, am I actually seeing it? If it's the North Pole and I'm picturing it in my mind, am I actually seeing any piece of the North Pole? Wait a minute, isn't it just my imagination? Any of this type of thing. Isn't it just my imagination? I mean, is there any reality to it? It's just my imagination. I mean, I can make it whatever I want. If you are picturing in your mind the North Pole, even though you may not know exactly what it looks like, you have an idea. And you're picturing it very clearly. Okay? Maybe not in full detail. You may see people, some explorer wandering around the area, but you don't see a specific face. If you did, then you're probably not picturing somebody who's actually there right now. I mean, you gotta realize what's what here. Okay? If you need to go ahead and fill in a particular face, go ahead and do that, but understand that chances are you're not envisioning something that's actually taking place in the physical plane. But you are picturing the North Pole in the mental plane. To some extent. Now, it depends on what technique you use here and how we want to talk about what you're really seeing. But you are picturing the North Pole in the mental plane. Yes, you are. Things are much more plastic and moldable in the mental plane, mind you, than they are in the physical plane. They happen much more rapidly. They are instant. With respect to our physical plane time concept. So I'm picturing the North Pole. I did actually picture the North Pole. Think about what that means. In the mental plane, from my mental plane, my individual mental body, energy, frequency, bandwidth of vibration, point of view. You cannot argue against that very easily. Okay? Which is more real? Depends on how we're going to define what real means. The mental plane has more reality than the physical, but then again, wouldn't we want to say that something that is not solely mental, so to speak here, but also has an astral component and a physical manifestation? In other words, it is a mental plane blueprint, and it is further crystallized into physical manifestation. In other words, it has all of those bandwidths of vibration frequency going on at the same time. Isn't that the more real? Yeah, but look, you're never going to have something that is physically, that is assembled from physical plane conscious substance in motion, or stuff, in other words, physical matter, and has no component of any other plane associated with it. You're never going to have that. To ask, well, is a mental object more or less real than is a physical object? That question, stated as such, and upon most people's conceptions who would state it as such, assumes that there are physical objects that have no mental component, and then there are mental objects that have no physical component. Well, there are mental objects that have no physical component. But there are no physical objects that have no mental component, or astral component, or, yeah. No. Those don't happen. The mental manifestations are dependent upon a mental plane activity and other plane activity. So what's more real? Something that's just in your imagination, or something that has hardness, physical hardness? That's not really a valid question. If we go ahead and acknowledge that all physical objects, physical substance objects, have their other plane components, component parts, let's say, or aspects, that's a better word, aspects, then the question makes sense. And yeah, I guess we can say that something has more reality if it includes a broader spectrum of frequency bandwidths, vibration frequency bandwidths. Yeah. Yeah. But when we think of this, let's not think of something that's involved with the physical plane and then add on numbers of other aspects, all right, to ask our question. Let's consider something starting at least with the mental plane and then add on aspects on up to the physical component or aspect, all right, when we're asking this question, when we want to know which has more reality to it. If indeed we're defining reality as being substance, vibration, frequency, spectrum, size. Okay? If I see something mentally, I'm picturing it intentionally, no matter how vaguely or clearly, depending on how much detail I actually know about the thing. If I know what a thing actually looks like, then I'm trying to go ahead and picture because it's some object I've actually seen, well, then I can fill in the details exactly. If I want to go ahead and create it as a mental plane object only at the moment, in order to perhaps bring it about physically sometime later, whenever the resources actually come together due to my focus on the thing and my activity toward bringing it about, starting with the mental, I am creating it, I am building it, then I may want to leave certain details out, unless I know exactly what I want to actually come about, then I will fill them in, understanding what I'm doing, what I'm actually picturing. Now, I can picture it here, I picture it right here, right? I can also overlay onto the physical plane with my visual sense, okay, my mental visual sense, my picture that's here. I can project it so that I'm actually, in a sense, really here, seeing that image spread across my entire visual field, as in out there, you know, over there. Like now, here's a pen. I can see it right here. I can also project that image to right about there on that pen. Okay, but it's still here. Okay, this raises a question. Where exactly are these things that we're picturing mentally? If in fact I am seeing, let's say there's some entity, and you can see it with your astral vision, let's say, right? You can see its astral presence off about 100 feet away. This is not your physical visual sense at work, right? Is it existing here? Is it existing within the envelope of your astral body? Or is what you're seeing actually over there 100 feet away? Are you seeing it with your mental and astral aspects of your visual sense 100 feet away or here? Which is it? You can go ahead and see it over there and see it here too. You go ahead and intentionally create the image that you are in fact also seeing, just like I can do with this pen out here, and then I create a mental image to go with it simultaneously. That's still there even if I take the physical pen away. Where are these things really in relation to one another? And there we come to a very good question. I mean, a very good thing to think about, folks. The answer is, it's all screen of consciousness that images are being cast upon, no matter which level of them we're talking about. Where is it all? Indeed, is the question that we're posing right here. Yes, indeed. Very good question. Where is it all? And where are these things in relation to one another? If we consider that what we're talking about is whether it's a physical object, a created mental image that is in that is due to the relationship between our occipital lobe, our central nervous system, our brain activity, and our seat of will right here. The interplay of the physical vision center there, and the point between our eyes, and the pineal gland in the middle, and so forth. Whether we're talking about there, whether we're talking about out here, or 100 feet away, physical object 100 feet away, an astral plane object 100 feet away, we're talking about objects with respect to the visual sense. Images cast upon the screen of a consciousness involving all planes of activity. That's what we're talking about here. So where they are and so forth, they are cast upon the consciousness, the screen of consciousness, okay? That's the answer. Now, when we take that screen of consciousness to be alive and malleable, plastic, it has plasticity, and it is controllable. The one level of activity is analogous to the others, and so on. We begin to get an idea of what creativity is like, what imagination has to do with it, what images have to do with it, what reality is like. You want to practice seeing things through to their end? Look at something right now, some physical object, and see it through to its end. Not some project you might have in mind with it, like tearing this pen apart, or building another one to look like it, or gluing together pieces of paper along one end to make a tablet, or any such thing. No, I'm just talking about some object, like this pen. See it through to its end. It will have an end. The form will come to an end eventually. The stuff, the conscious substance that is in motion, that currently comprises the form that I call a pen, the form and the function that I currently call a pen, will come to an end, but the conscious substance in motion that is involved will not. It will simply transform. It will last across the various forms, okay? I can see it in my mind through to its end. Now, am I going to be picturing it accurately? Like what will actually happen to this pen? That depends. I could. I could picture myself crushing this and pulverizing it completely into something that you can't even see anymore, really. And then go ahead and do it. Or I could just picture some wild notion of how it will come to its end eventually by just maybe sitting and rotting somewhere, and it might actually sit and rot somewhere else. I might be partially right about it. Let's just understand what our level of creativity is within it, and within our image of seeing something through to its end. We're being creative no matter what. But how relevant it is going to be at all of its levels of creativity to what may actually transpire in the future is partially up to us. Okay, but the further into the future we're talking about here, and the further away from physical plane possibility, well, then the less accurately we are picturing it as with respect to what's most likely going to happen. We need to just realize this, understand what we're doing, right? But as with respect to, am I picturing a possible future for this pen's coming to an end from its present state to when that's its current state, there's nothing left of it, physical plane wise, right? What we're creating, that fast forward, and the mental plane right now does in fact exist, just like that as it's happening, as a mental plane phenomena. And that is real. It just does not currently have a physical aspect. Its physical aspect stays like that. Put it that way. So you see how that the one can stay put for now, while the other aspect goes. And what is the difference? I mean, am I dealing with the pen's mental plane aspect, or is it just all in my imagination? That question comes back again, and we're once again asking, where does it exist? It's mental plane activity. Yes, this is a focal point of manifestation, and it has a mental plane component. Mental plane component. Not my mental body component, but my mental body is part of that mental plane. So once again, we're talking here about our microcosmic ability to create, but we're part of the macrocosm, which creates in very much the same way, analogously. So what we're ultimately talking about is objects, images that have various conscious substance in motion frequency bandwidths going on at the same time. Different spectrum, different degrees or greatnesses or smallnesses of bandwidth inclusions involved upon the screen of consciousness. Conscious substance in motion. is what we're talking about. So your sense of vision creates. You picture what you want to picture. You picture what you want to happen, and you make sure it's what you really want to happen. Fast forward things through to their end to help figure out whether something is what you really want. Maximize your performance. Evolve your life. Act now.